You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for hitting that play button. This is another episode of the Dave Bullis Podcast, and I'm of course Dave Bullis, but again, I think you already know that or should know that by now. And I just want to say thank you very much everyone who always shares the podcast on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram, wherever you're going to share the podcast. It helps out immensely. And by the way, we are actually in the Podcast Awards, so if you feel so inclined, I would appreciate it if you could vote for us in two categories, the People's Choice category and the Educational category. We got put in educational, I guess, because we are an educational podcast, I guess. So please, if you could just take a couple of minutes and vote for us in that would be a huge win for all of us. And if you do vote, please let me know so I can thank you on social media. On this week's episode of the podcast, I have a Canadian filmmaker, actor, and producer. He produced a film and actually started it as well and directed it that it's very close to what I talk about a lot on here. And it's pro wrestling in one way or another. I know I don't talk a lot about pro wrestling because I haven't watched it in years, but when I was growing up, I watched it a ton, probably way too much. So we just had Nick Mondo on, who was a professional wrestler turned filmmaker. We've had a few other filmmaking projects here and there that involve pro wrestling, but this one is a unique one unto itself because it really involves backyard wrestling. And I love the tagline for the film too. It's Unprofessional wrestling, which is a genius tagline. So we're going to talk all about this new film, Heel Kick, which is actually going through a little tour right now, and then it'll be out later this year. And we're also going to talk about how my next guest actually made money with his first film, believe it or not, which is just crazy to think of, right? Making money with your first film. We're going to talk about all that stuff, film school, networking, finding contacts, and we go over a lot of really cool producing stuff in this too. And we talk about pro wrestling. This is episode 171 with guest Danny Mac.
I did not go to film school, and it is something that I knew I wanted to do when I was growing up, but it just seemed too insurmountable and too difficult. You're talking to me now from Edmonton, Alberta, where I grew up. I'm just back here for my grandma's 100th birthday, and then I'll be back to Vancouver tonight. But growing up here where there's essentially no film scene, and it does have a fairly decent theater community, but really film and television, there's nothing, and there's no one who's doing it. So I didn't have any inspiration surrounding me. And the prices for film school were really high. And it's something that my mom and I were looking at when I was 15 or 16, because clearly I had an interest in it and I needed some sort of creative outlet because I was, kind of just being a little brat of a kid. But it seemed too expensive. And yeah, like I said, there was just nothing around me to indicate that it was something that I could pull off. So I kind of let it, I wouldn't want to say let the dream die, but I went to university and I still hadn't picked a major or a minor after 2 or 3 years. And I was taking a lot of studies, acting because I liked it. So I was training here and there, but I finally realized, I could probably just make a movie myself. And so began the journey of me producing my own projects.
So when you actually wanted to make your own movie, what were some of the first things that you did to sort of take those steps to actually make that movie?
Well, we, myself and my, one of the co-stars in Heel Kick, and my fellow producer Cooper Bebo, we would look at, scripts to get an idea of how to format them and how they were written. And then we, just started to, have, writing sessions together, and anyone who would want to work on something creative, we would. So we were writing, sketches for the Fringe, film, play, theater festival that we have here in Edmonton. And anyone who wanted to do something, and throw it up on YouTube YouTube we were contributing, but he and I were really interested in writing feature films. And then because we're actors and we're writers, but we don't really know anything about the technical aspect of filmmaking, we would seek out people who were in film school and ask them if they would want to come help us shoot something. And since we were some of the only people making an independent feature film in the city, we got a lot of attention right away. And before we knew it, we had a film crew on board, and they were helping us shoot our first feature film. And this was back in 2011.
So when you were actually, you got all that attention, has things changed then? So like, I mean, you know what I mean? Like everybody, who has an iPhone now is a filmmaker. So have you noticed, have things actually changed where it's become passe, or maybe it's become to the point where it's like in LA where it's a pain in the ass? I mean, have you noticed any difference?
Just in regards to like the amount of people who are making film, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. In your area.
Well, I mean, yes and no, because Vancouver is a pretty big film city. A lot of stuff is filmed there. It's a big service city, so a lot of big productions come through there, and Vancouver actors will help round out and fill out some of the roles that are needed, and the crew gets a lot of work down there as well. But yeah, it's funny how you say everyone with an iPhone can be a filmmaker, and that's true. And I think it's so much easier for people to make films these days, but the amount of drive and determination that it takes to pull something like that off, that doesn't change. It's still backbreaking, and it's still a serious commitment of, if not money, seriously time. So while it's easier than ever, I don't think more people than ever are actually doing it, because, you know what I mean? It's tough to take that plunge. And, first of all, it's tough to sit down and write a film. It's tough to assemble a crew and a cast, and it's tough to shoot the thing and then edit it and then sell it. So, as much as we have the resources available to us, I actually don't see people taking advantage of it that much, because I think people do understand how much work it is. And that's kind of a scary, like it's a turnoff for people.
Yeah, it's true. And, when I say everyone who has an iPhone is, considers themselves a filmmaker, it's just because, it's kind of like that idea, I've done commercial work too, where commercial videography work, and, the guy's like, hey, my son or daughter's got an iPhone, why should I hire you? Or, people who want to start their own vlog on YouTube, but yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. It does still take all that time and planning and effort, which is why most movies don't get made, right? They're nobody is normal who actually makes a film. Normal is sitting on your couch talking about making a movie, right, Danny?
Yeah, everyone on Earth has done that. I got a great idea for a movie or a book or a TV show or whatever. Everyone has said that at one point in their life. It only takes the truly insane people to, think that it's something they should actually try to do for a living.
It was funny. One time I actually came home from a shoot one day, and I was so tired. I just wanted a shower, another shower. I already taken one that day, but it was a long ass day. And I sort of plopped down on the couch, and a friend of mine, came over, and he was like, oh, what were you doing today? And blah, blah. And he goes, oh man, I got this idea for a movie. And I'm like, I don't want to ever talk about movies again. I said, I am so tired right now. Like, I'm just aching all over. I was sunburned. I was like, I don't care.
God.
I don't care anymore.
Yeah. And that eventually happens. Like, people say, what would be a great idea? And you're like, you know what? I mean, bringing my own idea to life is stressing me out. So please keep your ideas to yourself at this point, because I can't help you. I'm losing my mind working on my own projects. It's sad to say, but yeah, I definitely hear you.
Yeah, it's that whole idea of like that friend. It's always like, hey, or a friend from high school. Do you get that? By the way, I don't talk about that a lot, but I have friends from high school who constantly send me messages about some script or an idea or one wanted to shoot a zombie film in the woods, and he wanted my advice, and I'm like, you've never talked to me ever unless you need something. So I'm like, why the hell would I help you? You know what I mean? It's so like phony. You know what I mean?
I get a lot of that. Some people reach out, and I don't think it's that they necessarily like want something from me, but at the same time, they are like, I got a great idea for a thing. All you would have to do is write it and produce it and shoot it and get the money together. And I'm like, are you insane? Like, there's absolutely, and I don't have a shortage of ideas myself. I'm trying to figure out what I want to do next and what I'm going to put out there. So someone with zero experience coming to you saying like, I got a great idea, and you haven't talked to them in a long time, yeah, it can be frustrating. God bless them, though. God bless them.
Yeah, it's that whole idea of like, what's so complicated about this? You have all the connections, and I'd sit there and I'd go, guys, it just doesn't work like that. And I get a lot of, see, I'm glad that you understand what I'm talking about. You get that a lot because I've had girls too that I went to high school with who want to be quote unquote actresses, and they don't really want to be actresses. They want to show up to set or wherever and take pictures of themselves so people can tell them how beautiful they are.
Yeah, there's really, and there's nothing glamorous about like the job of an actor, really. If you are an actor, there's so many moments where you're like, what the hell? This is not what I thought it would be, but you have to love it, and I do. But yeah, when I really explain to people like what my day is like when I'm on set, either for a commercial or a TV show or something, it's it's really a kick in the pants, I think.
So, when you started in 2011, when you started making your own film, your first film, and you put everything together, did you have any of this culture shock that we're talking about right now where you were like, oh my God, what the hell did I get myself into?
Yeah, absolutely. And pardon me, I got the date wrong. It was back in 2009. We started writing it and we shot it in 2010. And yeah, holy crap. I could not believe how long the days were, how long it took to get shots set up. You don't understand. And especially I'd never been to film school. So that was my film school. And I would have quit because it was just so intense and there was so much work. But Cooper and I put our life savings into the movie and we completely funded it ourselves. So we kept working our regular jobs Monday to Friday, and then because we couldn't afford to pay anyone, we could only shoot the movie Friday night, all of Saturday, all of Sunday, and then we'd go back to work. We'd only shoot weekends. And like, I was so drained. I could not believe how tired I was. And I was almost so exhausted that quitting would have required more thought and effort than just staying the course. So we ended up finishing it. But yeah, just when I say that like that first film was my film school, I really believe that, because trial by fire is the only way that I've really stuck to things and learned in my life, I've found. And yeah, it really prepares you for like what the career is going to be like. Of course, you improve the next time around. We made a ton of mistakes, but learning from them and going forward, there's no better way to do it, I think.
So what was the biggest obstacle you faced when making that movie? Like, was there one day or one thing that happened where you were like, I think I'm done?
I mean, that I feel like every day, honestly, like somehow, and this is crazy, and really, the money was our like least, like we were always worried about the money because literally it was just his and my life savings. We both put $20,000 up to make this $40,000 feature. But there was sort of nothing to worry about because we had the money. Like we didn't have to go knock on any doors for more. So oddly enough, the money wasn't the biggest problem. What the biggest problem was that we were producing a film and we'd never done that before. We never made a short. Well, we had made a short film before, but like that took an afternoon, and like this was just so intense. So, yeah, we were just. We were faced with obstacles every day. Like we didn't like transportation and getting everything to our certain locations was rough, and like, who was going to return all the gear, and like there was just things we didn't know that were actual things that you had to do on set, and so we didn't delegate properly. So it just be like day one, there's like 90 things that are undone that we need to just assign to people to start doing. And because we were the producers and we couldn't pay anyone, we had to do all those things ourselves. So while money wasn't an issue, if you're not paying anyone, you're not going to get any extra out of anyone. They were just doing it for the experience. So we took on way too much. And that was probably why, I can't even pick a specific thing, but really the umbrella of all the problems is that we just wore way too many hats and we juggled too many things.
And you see, Danny, I think that happens to a lot of filmmakers. You see, because everything is a little more accessible, quote unquote, with whether it be a camera or maybe it be, a way to storyboard, or whether it be, hey, listen, I have an idea, or you know what I mean? You kind of build up this confidence to go in there and do it. But I think when you wear so many hats, it all hits you when you're trying to do two things at once. And I can tell you, I remember I was doing one of my student films, and I remember somebody had backed out who was supposed to be like my location manager / like UPM. And everybody instead was calling me now as I'm trying to direct the scene for like directions, questions about stuff.
Yes.
Hey, you know what I mean? And I'm just like, guys, I'm trying to direct a freaking scene here. And I'm trying to talk to the cinematographer, and I'm trying to do this. And people are coming up and asking me questions. People are coming up because the people who had the location, there was like other stuff going on. So people were walking in the room going, "Oh, are you guys filming here?" And I'm like, "Oh, Jesus Christ, shoot me now. What did I do to myself?"
I got a funny story. Our very first day on set, we actually didn't have the permits to shoot in the park that we were shooting in, and I didn't know this. So someone, like a park ranger, came up to our director and was like, "Hey, do you have permits to shoot here?" And he was just petrified, and the only thing he could think to say was the name of the person he was supposed to email to get the permits that he never actually did. And let's say that person's name was Alex. So this park ranger comes up to our director our first day on set. He's like, "Hey, did you get the proper permits to be here?" And all he says was, "Alex." And then the park ranger somehow accepted that and was like, "Okay, well, have a good shoot," and left us. But we could have been like shut down before we begun. So God bless him for that one. I have no idea how we weaseled our way out of that situation, but
it's like one of those movie jokes, you know, where the character kind of just like blurts out an answer by accident, or like they're on Jeopardy, and it's like, yeah, that's exactly it. That's the answer. It's
yeah. Meanwhile, he's just like breathing heavily and sweating his ass off because we almost lost everything.
and you know, and see stuff like that. You know, I have a funny story. Didn't happen on one of my sets, but it was. I actually was visiting a set one day, and this kind of like park ranger type of guy walks by, and he looks over and he just sees all these film cameras and gear and everything else, and immediately I'm like, well, this guy. I know these guys who are running this film set, who it's filming is. I know they don't have permits, and I look at the park ranger, and he's on a bike, and he just kind of looks around and just pedaled off and never said a word. And I'm thinking to myself, what made him not do this? Like, what made him not want to get involved? And there's two things that I think of that made him not want to get involved. As I kind of took a look around, number one was there was probably like 300 people there. And just because it was a concert scene, and two, there was a guy in an 8-foot like monster costume just kind of rampaging around, and I think both of them, he's probably like, I don't even want to get involved in whatever the hell this is.
Yeah, he could probably smell like the dreams that he would have crushed also if he just followed up on it. I think that was a big part of it too. This park ranger was like, you know what? These kids look like they've got enough trouble already as it is, so I'm just going to bike away from this situation.
I mean, and we're right in Philadelphia too. We usually crush dreams here in Philadelphia, so you know, that guy was
that is the city motto, isn't it? Where dreams go to be crushed, I believe.
Oh yeah, that Hitchbot thing. It survived Canada and everything else, and then as soon as it came here, it was done.
That's it.
So Danny, when you after you got done making Love Hate, which was your first film, how did you go about releasing the film, or even just marketing the film?
That was another sort of. I mean, we didn't do too much marketing, but we really got lucky on that one because we were able to sell the film to a Canadian video on demand. Not subscription based, but transactional video on demand channel called Super Channel. And the only thing that we had heard about it was that a guy that we knew apparently made a short film, and he sold it to them, and they gave him like $14,000. And we never confirmed this. We never looked into it. We didn't even talk to the guy. We're like, oh, if he can do that, we can do it. So we proceeded to make this film. And then their head offices happened to be in Edmonton, where we shot Love Hate. And we literally just drove there one day. We Google Maps where their offices were. Cooper and myself just drove there in my old Honda Accord with a Blu-ray of our film. And we're like, hey, who can we talk to about buying our movie? And they were like, I guess the acquisitions head is here. So we met with her, and she passed the film off to her team. And we got a call like a few weeks later saying that they would buy the movie off of us. And we ended up breaking even on our first project just from that, and a couple of theatrical screenings that we held ourselves.
I mean, that is a Hail Mary story, man. You know, you just
I know.
you threw it up there, but see, but stories like that are a success. You know, that's what people aim for. You know, to do stuff like that. Hey, we sold our first movie. You know, or we you know, we did this or we did that. You know, it's funny. A guy I know actually used to work with Oren Patelli, who did Paranormal Activity. And one day, I don't know if you've ever seen the first or Paranormal Activity, but one day Oren came in and he said, guys, I just want to say it's been nice working with you. I actually just put my 2 weeks in. And they said, oh, well, you know, what do you have, another job? And he said, well, actually, I just sold a movie to Steven Spielberg. And they were like, yeah, right. Like, come on, what are you really doing? And he goes, no. Yeah. He goes, no, like, I'm going to be on all these web series or not web series, like web interviews and stuff like that. And he goes, and I'm going to be on like this channel. He goes, just, you know, and that's it. Well, like little by little, they started, like, all these interviews started popping up, and they were like, oh my God, this is amazing. But I mean, it's stuff like that, you know, it's stories like that, you know, it sort of keeps that indie film dream alive, you know, where you're able to actually, you know, do these things and actually say, hey, look, we made our money back, or we made at least some money, and now we can take that money and make another film.
Exactly. And yeah, when you say it was a Hail Mary, it absolutely was, because we were, you know, we were just delusional. We thought that the movie was going to explode and we'd make so much money that our next film could be like triple the budget, and that it would be smooth sailing. And then, you know, we were able to sell it. And so we got national broadcast, and we made like a lot of money off of just 3 theatrical screenings that we did. And so we made our money back, plus maybe like, I don't know, like $3,000 each. And this was after like 3 years of work. So like whoop-de-doo, right? But we were like upset. We were like, man, I can't believe we only broke even. And other filmmakers, like, we didn't realize how tough it was to, you know, get a broadcast deal and make your money back within like 6 months of releasing your film. And all these other filmmakers like, are you insane that you're complaining right now? Like, you sold your first film and you made all your money back? Like, what is your problem? And now, as I've just like been in the industry so much longer, I was like, what a shitty little brat I was being, complaining that we didn't like bring in heaps of cash from our little independent film. And yeah, I'm just, you know, we did everything wrong, but it turned out all right for us in the end. So I'm really proud of our little effort that we put in back then.
And I'm also glad that you got my football reference too, because I mean, I know you're in Canada, and I'm like, wait a minute, will he understand the? But yeah, I'm glad you got that.
That's right.
Because you
we
really
have orange football here. There's 9 downs before the ball changes hands.
Well, I've actually been to Canada, and I saw a Toronto Argonauts game one time.
Oh, the Argos, yeah, that's right.
So
CFL.
Yeah. So it was just funny though, because I was, you know, the NFL is not really popular outside of the USA, and I'm just like, man, I always got to watch my slang, and even when I'm talking to other filmmakers from America, I got to watch my Philly slang. They don't say something weird, and they're like, oh yeah, Dave, you know.
No, I'm all over it. I got you.
But you know, just to go back to about Love Hate, I mean, again, you know, selling your first film, that's huge. And I mean, now, I mean, because you sold that in like 2010, 2011. I mean, what do you think about the marketplace now? You know, even tying in with your new movie, Hill Kick, about, I mean, what do you think the market is like now? Do you think it's more crowded? Because I've heard a lot of different opinions and perspectives of this. Some people say, yeah, it's more crowded, but there's more avenues. And then the other sort of option is, or the other perspective is, the good movies, no matter what, are always just going to rise to the top.
I mean, I hope that that's the case, because, you know, then that means that people will see good films, and that will reward, and that will, you know, teach people to make good projects. I don't know. I think that it's really exciting, the time that we're in right now, especially with all the methods of self-distribution available. That is really something that gets me excited about continuing down this path as an independent filmmaker and beyond. And while I do think there is a ton of just product out there, like there's so many shows and films, I do believe that the good ones rise to the top. And I think that you have to hold on to that, because I don't know, what's the alternative thought on that? That, you know, like a bad movie with great marketing will be the only thing that really matters one day. And, you know, while that may be the case, I'm sure we've all heard a million things about a movie we don't care about. In the independent scene, you have so much more leeway, I believe, and people aren't as tough on films. And, you know, while you do have to have a thick skin, and everyone is going to have critics, it's kind of a nice community. People are always willing to help each other and talk about their projects. And there's so many case studies. I think that's the coolest thing about it. People say, yeah, there's so many projects out there right now. It's such a cluttered marketplace. But if you're trying to produce an independent film, you can look at all of those things and you can just case study them about what they did right and what they did wrong. And I'm sure everyone has, I can't even tell you how many Kickstarter film projects that I've seen that just never got to production, that never saw the light of day. And that's useful information. And then all the ones that did make it, that's useful information. So yes, the marketplace is cluttered, but I think for indie filmmakers, that's a good thing, because you can sit back and you can plot your course more effectively than you ever could before. And even just in 2011, when we sold that film, if that head of acquisitions wasn't based in our hometown, we never would have been able to drive there and use our just in-person charm. If we did have it then, we certainly don't have much of it anymore. But I don't know if we could pull something like that off again. But there were just so many things that added up. And if one of them fell through, we wouldn't have had any idea what to do, because we sold directly to the broadcaster. We did not get a distribution deal, nor did we even seek one out, because we were able to go direct to the broadcaster. So now, if we were in the same circumstance now, which I kind of am with this film, at least you wouldn't be completely screwed if the one thing, to get your film out there doesn't work. So it's exciting. There is a lot of noise, but you can learn from the noise, and that's good too.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point, Danny. And you raise another excellent point, too, and that is a lot of Kickstarters that don't actually see production. And that happens. I mean, the most notorious of that is the video game industry, just because of all the things that happen in that industry. But, I've seen film projects that have crowdfunded and gone nowhere. I mean, some even famously have been crowdfunded, and there's some pretty big people that have joined the crowdfunding spectrum. I won't name names, but they've taken some money and not produced anything. I'm sorry, Danny.
Oh, I just said yikes. Yeah, that's a bad. Yeah, you don't like to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I always wonder. I always wanted to bring one of them on this show and just be like, what the hell happened? Yeah, just be like, what, did you really not have a plan? Did you guys just throw this up and somebody donated $50,000? I speaking of which, I had a friend of mine who started a crowdfunding campaign in 2012. He had a mysterious benefactor, dead serious, give him $10,000 out of nowhere.
Okay.
Just out of nowhere. And I mean, he was he couldn't figure out who it was. Nobody would. It was out of nowhere, and he actually was trying to figure out who the hell that was, and he never figured it out. And I was like, well, I guess you have to make your movie now. And he kind of he almost became paralyzed by trying to figure out who this was. And he was like,
"There's your movie." Right.
He was more adamant about it. He's like, all right, I got to figure out who has the resources to give me $10,000 and not miss it. And I'm just like, make your movie. Who the hell cares about?
I know, that's a sweet ass problem to have, my friend.
I know. How would that even sound if you said that? Oh man, I got this bad problem. Oh, Danny, what's the problem? Oh, some random dude gave me $10,000 to make a film. Oh,
yeah, it's keeping me up at night. I just can't figure out who's generous and loves me. It's just driving me insane. So we did crowdfunding for Heel Kick, I should probably add, and I didn't want to do it. And crowdfunding is something that I believe in, and I appreciate it, but it's just something that I personally don't want to do, and I never wanted to do it. The only reason I did a GoFundMe campaign was because I was just screwed. But the advantage that I had was that my film was already shot, and I was able to release a trailer for it. So my whole GoFundMe approach was, hey, my movie's done, so there's a 100% chance that if you donate to this, that it's not going to be lost in the abyss of, indie filmmakers asking for money. And I released a trailer, and everyone could see that it was complete and that it was on its way. And I just said, hey, we need to pay, you guys want to see it, right? We need to pay for, insurance. We need to pay for these theatrical screenings because we're just four-walling it. And if you guys give us a little bit of money, the film can be out right away. And if not, I just don't really know what to do. So we did an aggressive 3-week campaign, and we raised $12,000, and that finished off all the funds that we needed. And we were so proud of our community and our fans for helping us with that. But that people sort of were like, wow, I can't believe you pulled that off in just a few weeks. And I was, but like I said, I was a little confused at first too. I didn't really think it would go that well, but it's because we had the film in the can already. And people are getting really weary of Kickstarters and GoFundMes and projects like this because, like we have just discussed, so many of them never see the light of day. And it's like, ugh, why do I have to be supportive of something that I know isn't going to happen? And, so I think people, when they're pursuing these crowdfunding avenues, they really need to have their shit together because it's going to sour it for other filmmakers. Imagine like knowing that you could produce something if you raised 20 grand, but people are just like, oh yeah, right, buddy. Like just like the other 3 I donated to, that's ruining it for everyone. So, it's a tool, but it's too accessible. It's just like a phone with a camera. Everyone can shoot a movie. That's why you got a lot of crappy movies out there. And it's like anyone can start a Kickstarter campaign for their film. That's why there's so many graveyards full of dead films that never saw the light of day.
Yeah, absolutely, Danny. And I actually knew a person who would go around from project to project, actually just doing crowdfunding campaigns. And like her timeline was just nothing but pitching crowdfunding campaigns to people. And people are like tuning her out. Like all you do is promote. And like half the time you never even hear about the movie ever after she's done promoting it. So people just started tuning her out left and right. And it's just like, it's that fine sort of ebbing and flowing. It's kind of, like in marketing, you can't just keep marketing to people because they start tuning out,
Yeah.
And that's what she was doing. And that's why I think, a lot of times when, and a friend of mine who was on Twitter, and he said he followed a bunch of filmmakers, and he said literally half of my timeline is people crowdfunding projects, and he goes, it's just to the point where it's like almost unusable. And I said, it's just the industry and how it is sometimes. Personally, there's different. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of different ways to crowdfund. But personally, I was guilty of that in 2010 when I was crowdfunding as well, and I know it does get kind of. I don't want to say the word murky, but I might be, but you know what I mean? Like you were just saying, Danny, it does. Some people just don't want to ask people for money or, because it looks like online panhandling or something like that. You know what I mean? And I've had conversations with producers or conversations with actors and stuff. And I said, you guys have to put up the crowdfunding campaign too, or whatever. And people would out and out refuse because of that. They would say, oh, this is just online panhandling or whatever else. And I'm like, this is how you get indie films made. It's funded by, you'd rather be funded by a crowd than funded by some producer who's going to tell you how to set up every single shot and how to have final edit. You know what I mean?
Oh, it's so true. Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it'll get better or worse, but now has never been a more important time to have it together as a filmmaker and have a plan that you are able to execute, and a worst case scenario that involves your film still getting made at the end of the day.
So, speaking of films getting made at the end of the day, you made Heel Kick, which is about 2 backyard wrestlers. And, honestly, before we get into it, could you actually just give us a, brief synopsis about the film?
Sure, yeah. So Heel Kick is about 2 backyard wrestlers that decide to finally go pro after 10 years of procrastinating and saying that this is what they're destined to do in their life. The only problem is that they are terrible. They lack all athletic skill required to do such a thing, and they don't really have any intelligence or the drive you would need to go after such a grand dream. So it's a mockumentary, it's a comedy, and it follows Reggie and Maurice, 2 best friends, as they finally go to professional wrestling training at an academy called ECCW, which is a real wrestling academy. And that's pretty much the black and white of it.
So, when you actually sat down to actually start writing this thing, what was the impetus for the idea?
It came from a few different places. One, I was a huge wrestling fan between the ages of like 8 and 13. And then I grew out of it, but I still stayed interested in the behind the scenes world of it. And I like the business side of it. It was really interesting to me. So I would read wrestlers' autobiographies, even though I wasn't absorbing like the product anymore. So I always had a great respect for it. And then all of a sudden, I had all this knowledge about it. And they say, write what you know. And so that was one of the things that got me going. But another was that my older cousin He also loved professional wrestling, but wanted to do it for a living. And he, he's a really good looking dude, really well spoken. He's like just pure muscle, 6'3". And he went to train at the Lance Storm Academy in Calgary, Alberta, a prolific wrestling town, and that's one of the places that really ship guys off to the WWE. Or the Fed, as they refer to it, if they're any good. And so my cousin went there and he quit after just like a week. And I was like, man, I couldn't believe it. This was like what he'd been talking about his whole life. And it was so interesting to hear him tell me how it was different than he thought it would be. But even more that stuck with me is when he told me about some of the other kids in the class who just were delusional about their, about their, basically their odds of making it in the business, because you can just tell when people don't have that drive or don't have what it takes to do something. And not like he was putting anyone down. There was a lot of great talent in the class as well, but I just couldn't get that out of my mind, the idea of two people who are attempting something that, have no idea how tough it's actually going to be. And so that is sort of where the idea for Heel Kick came.
I like that, by the way, the experience of hearing how he went there and, what he found out, because I think that's a lot of times, people have an idea of what something's going to be. And then when they finally get that, that expectation, and when then reality finally hits, they're like, this isn't what I really wanted. I didn't really want to, I thought training was going to be a little different, or I thought this experience would be a little better, or, and you meet people too. Who have that who have that unreal expectations of what this is going to give to them, or their, you know what I mean, and you find that in film too, where somebody thinks they're going to make a film, in their living room with an iPhone and win Sundance. You know what I mean? It's like, how many times have you heard that?
Yeah.
But it's stuff like that. I mean, that's why I really am glad we got into telling this story, because it adds to the movie itself. Because I used to do backyard wrestling back here in Philadelphia, and so the movie kind of speaks to me. Now, honestly, Danny, I haven't seen the movie yet, and I'm gonna make a note to actually make sure I check this movie out, because obviously it fits right in my wheelhouse. But like you, I fell out of love with wrestling a long while ago. And but again, it's still fun to see movies like this about backyard wrestling, or movies like The Wrestler and stuff like that. It's kind of cool to see that this stuff that we used to be into, and as long as it's a good story with it, and that it's not all about that. You know what I mean? It's all good.
Absolutely, yeah. This is kind of the wrestling movie that I wished was around when I was really, really into wrestling. And it's been cool to screen the film around North America and have like real hardcore wrestling fans tell me that as well. It means a lot. And wrestling is such an amazing subculture. And you can go deep down the rabbit hole of learning about it and exploring what that world is like. And it was just so fun to get back into it. Not to mention the fact that I literally had to train because I play one of the backyard wrestlers in the movies.
So did you train by getting hit with light tubes and going through tables, Danny?
Well, the film starts with, these guys are more like fans than anything. They're just classic procrastinators that they pretty much just goof off all day. And then one of the guy who plays my brother, Matthew Graham, he challenges us. He says, I'll pay for your wrestling school, but you have to go to class every day and you have to improve. And if you can't do it, if you can't show that you got what it takes, then you've got to, give up on this wrestling dream forever and just get a real job and move on with your life. So that's when they start going to wrestling school. And so I wanted to show real progression. So I placed myself and Chris Wilcox, who plays Maurice, the other backyard wrestler, I placed us in an actual training program with a real wrestling academy called ECCW, based in Vancouver. And they operate all over the Pacific Northwest, and some really good talent comes out of there. I don't know if Kyle O'Reilly, who's just joined up in NXT the other day, and he's big on the indie scene. And, just tons of great talent go through there and still go through there. But we were actually training for 6 months to prepare for what we do in the film. We didn't tell anyone that we were doing it for a movie. Only very few people knew, because we didn't want to get treated any differently. So eventually they found out. You do form, serious bonds with the people in class and the people that are training you after a few months, which you should. When you're dropping each other on your spine 40 times a day, you should probably get close to those people and make sure they're on your good side. But yeah, so I actually had to train to become a professional wrestler for it, and it was, you know, talk about things being different than you thought they would be. Oh man.
So, you know, with your experience on Love and Hate, what was some of the things that you took in a heel kick? Like, was it about, you know, not wearing too many hats? You know, was it maybe doing things a little bit differently in terms of like planning or even marketing?
Marketing, definitely, because the whole world of film marketing changed from 2010 to now. So that was just something that I never had to worry about before. But I tried to educate myself on that as best as possible. And our co-producer on the film is Greg Miller, and he's a really big name in the entertainment world, and he's a YouTube star and really big in the video game world. And he just has a huge love for professional wrestling, and he and I became friends a few years ago. And so he's been spreading the word about the film as the co-producer, getting it out there. So he's been, you know, he's sort of our human megaphone. I like to refer to him that way. And he's really helped us get butts in the seats at these screenings and have people find out about the film. In regards to wearing a lot of hats, I still did that. I was still the writer, the lead, the co-director, and the producer on this project. And I was in the editing room for every frame of the film. And not to mention the fact that I was, you know, working out and training at a professional wrestling academy for 6 months as well. But I think the difference was just getting a little bit more money together so you can pay people enough that your film is their main priority. Because that was the biggest takeaway from Love Hate, was that when everyone's got their other job and when you can't afford to pay anyone, you know, everyone's still committed and they want to help you out. But when it's their job, it's a different story, right? Like, everyone's going to be there, and nothing can take them away from that place. And you also aren't working on people's free time. Their free time is when they're off of your set. And, you know, it seems simple, but that was really the biggest takeaway. If someone was going to be there more than a couple of days for the shoot, they were going to get paid for it, and it was going to be their job. And so with that said, I could wear all those hats. And, you know, there's something to be said for stepping back and sharing the responsibility. And I certainly did that, even though it sounds like I wore all these hats. But, you know, if you have a vision for something, you might as well wear as many hats as you possibly can, because, you know, you don't want to delegate something off to someone who's not as passionate about the project as you are, because it's going to lose its voice. So people are like, man, you did a lot in this movie. And I was like, yeah, well, I had a very certain way that I wanted to say things. So it was just kind of a no-brainer for me, really.
Yeah. And see, so what I wanted to ask is, how did you go about getting George as a producer? And also, like, when you talk about, you know, having money to pay people, did you actually, you know, go out and put together like a pitch packet to find different people and sort of say, like, you know, this is what we did with Love Hate, and, you know, this is what we could do with this movie if we had just a little bit more money? Exactly.
Yeah. Basically, I put together a little plan, and I sent it to pretty much everyone I knew who I figured could spare like a couple $1,000s, and they wouldn't, you know, if they never made their money back, they wouldn't hate me, or they wouldn't have to sell their home or something like that. So I put together a package. I told everyone, you know, what I did with Love Hate, with extremely little resources, and how I could capitalized on another film today with much greater success. And we never even sold DVDs of our first film. We didn't do anything else with it after that, because it just became so much work, and we wanted to move on to other projects. So it was pretty easy to convince people to come on board with this one, especially after they read the script and they thought it was really funny and really touching and they liked it. And that was pretty much it for that. And then in regards to getting Greg Miller on board, we Cooper and I threw a charity Mario Kart tournament at this pub in Vancouver, where we live, and we flew celebrities from the gaming world out. So we had cosplayers come out, we had game developers, and we got in touch with Greg Miller, who was just leaving his job at IGN at the time. I think he was the senior PlayStation editor, and we had him come out, and we formed a friendship there, and we just stayed in touch ever since. And then the closer we got, the more I realized how heel kick was something that would be like right up his alley. And I asked if he wanted to come on as a co-producer and help spread the word about the film, and he said yes. And so that's how we've been getting the word out ever since.
Now, I see that's absolutely fantastic. By the way, I accidentally called him George instead of Greg. I don't know why. I don't know where we got George from. Sorry about that. But
Oh, good.
but see that stuff like that. You see, I always have a saying, your net worth is your network, and being able just to go up to people and it's kind of like what Sam Raimi did. Honestly, Danny, with the first Evil Dead, he went to different people and they each kicked in a little bit of money, and that's how he made the film. Rather than having one investor who gives, it's kind of like that idea. Do you want one investor to give you $1 million, or do you want 1 million investors to give you $1?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
So it's kind of like, there's pros and cons to each. And obviously, and honestly, with doing this podcast, I've heard both and everything in between. But using that, and using your network, and then able to get somebody like Greg and as forming a relationship with him. And, just for everyone listening too, Danny, I just want to pick your brain about this really quickly. For somebody who is thinking about maybe pitching a YouTube star or pitching somebody else, what are some of the tips you have for them? Because we've all seen that mistake where it's like they meet somebody that they want to work with, and the first thing they do is like, "You have to help me, please, God." Do you have any like tips or anything on like networking or even pitching that you could just give to the listeners?
I would say, and I think the people who are the best at this would tell you the same thing, and it's that don't pester people right out of the gate. You need to form honest-to-God relationships and bonds with people, and have things that you both like and share interest in. And then, if something is a good fit, then I think you should approach them. Otherwise, just don't go ringing every doorbell that you can find asking for favors. Like Greg and I, like we flew him down to Vancouver for that thing, and that was just a party, and we raised like $7,000 for the BC Children's Hospital. It was just a good time, and we stayed in touch after that. And I just presented him the movie, and he would keep telling me like, anything you need for help on this thing, like let me know. And, so it wasn't so much me asking him as him offering. And then I said, you know what, let's make it official. Let's make you a part of the team. So I think just like look for the signs. Like some people will be interested in jumping on projects with you and others won't. But in regards to like a YouTube celebrity specifically, that is a thing that we're seeing a lot more of in the indie film world. I'm not sure if you've noticed it, but when I was at the AFM in Santa Monica 2 years ago, a lot of people's pitches like weren't with movie stars anymore. It was with YouTube stars in the roles, and that they were coming on as producers and stuff like that. And I was like, wow, I just talked to like 6 filmmakers, and I didn't know half the names they were talking about because they're not actors. They're online celebrities. And I think that's a trend that's going to be going up. So I would just say for that, remember at the end of the day, your film has to be well acted. And it seems like funny to say that, but a lot of people forget that. They just try and cram as many recognizable names into a project as possible. But like, just think of all the amazing talent that have been in a bad movie before. Like, you're not going to watch a bad movie with your favorite actor in it. And I'm not saying that they would be giving a bad performance, but just things don't always come together, and that performance has to be there on screen. So I really like the idea of Greg coming on as a co-producer, because what these people do best is build communities and build awareness about things that they think are cool. And so I think that the capacity in which Greg has come on is a great way to involve some of these YouTube celebrities, because they're interested in production and film and stuff like that. You don't necessarily have to, make them the star of your movie if that's something that you're not comfortable doing. And I'm not saying that, internet celebrities aren't great performers. A lot of them are. But there's more than one way to include someone in your film to benefit its longevity.
Yeah, actually, we had Jason Brubaker on the podcast, and he actually was at the forefront of doing this. What he did was he got a bunch of YouTuber stars together, and he made Camp Dakota for Netflix. And it was a full of YouTube stars. Well, I have friends who are, they're probably like 10, 15, 20 years older than I am, and they all have kids and stuff like that. And the kids were like, oh my God, Camp Dakota's coming out. And like, what the hell is Camp Dakota? Who the hell are these people? Why is everyone caring about this movie? And it's like, because it's full of YouTube stars, and they just packed it full of them. And it was like #1 on Netflix when it came out. But I agree with you completely, by the way. You have to make sure that they can, because if you do like maybe a 5 or 10 second video, hey, that's really cool. But, you know, imagine stretching that out to an hour and a half. You know, is that sustainable? Is this person sustainable? Because, you know, like we were just saying at the beginning of this interview, if they're not, if they're not around film or know how this all works, I mean, you end up saying to them, hey, listen, you used to spend an hour a day making a video that got 1 million hits. Well, now you're going to spend 16 hours on set, and we're going to be lucky to break even with this film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just a completely different world. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Jason Brubaker is such a smart guy too. And you see a lot of other people try to capitalize on that idea, and it doesn't always work out. But I do think that's going to be a serious trend in the film industry, and that's not going away anytime soon. So if that's what you're gonna do, if you're gonna include people from another industry that isn't the film industry and bring them in to your film project, just make sure that you're doing it in the best way possible to service the film.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, and we've both seen movies that sort of fall into that whole like celebrity sort of trap. I mean, for instance, I had a friend of mine, he casted this girl specifically because of her social media following. And here's the kicker. She refused to promote the movie to her social media following. So
what?
Yeah. And it was like, and finally, begrudgingly, she finally did, and it got nothing. Like, they had no analytics from it because nobody really followed her to hear about some movie she was going to be in. They wanted to see photos of her, you know, in like a bikini and stuff like that. She wasn't a YouTube star. I should have predicated everything with that. But she was like, you know, like a model, and I
hear you. Yeah.
And he was like, oh my God, if we get her in there, this is going to be awesome. And, you know, it just all faltered away. It didn't really do much of anything. And people with lower numbers had much more engaged fans who were like, we want to see this person as an actor. You know, we want to see this person in an actual film. And, you know, I said, you know, it does make sense though, if you think about it. You know, if some guy follows a model online, does he necessarily, would he pay to see her in a movie when he can get a photo of her for free, you know?
Yeah, it doesn't translate. It really doesn't. And yeah, hopefully people will figure out the best way to do it. I really love my relationship with Greg. Like, we are friends as well, but I think this is a cool project, and the way that he's helping spread the word about it is great. And, you know, his community is into this kind of stuff. Like, there's a lot of pro wrestling fans that follow him and the Kind of Funny group. So it was just a good fit. Yeah. So if it wasn't, he wouldn't be involved, but, you know, who knows?
Yeah, and you know, just to going back to backyard wrestling in your movie Heel Kick, you know, there is that wrestling industry. The fans are very loyal, especially there's all the hardcore fans who go to the indie shows every weekend. You know, just by, again, I haven't seen the movie yet. You know, and I'll be honest, I haven't seen the movie yet. So I don't want to be one of those guys, Danny, who tries to, like, you know, fake it through. Like, you ever see those interviews where
right.
The guy clearly hasn't seen the movie, so he asks questions like, well, how did you do that thing? And it's like, what? It's like, you know, but I can imagine this is a movie for them, because this, again, is a movie I would have wanted to see in a way, because you know, again, I used to be big into wrestling and do backyard wrestling stuff and do all that crazy nonsense that you look back on now and like, oh my God, how am I not dead? But you know, it's just that idea of going to these independent shows, and that's what I imagine the two leads are two guys, you know, aiming to, you know, get to the biggest, you know, the league in the land, but they have to, you know, train at the local, you know, wrestling school. They have to, you know, go into and wrestle on some of these indie promotions that, and again, it's probably not what they think it's going to be, you know, and because it's just like real life, you know?
Very true. Yeah. I wanted to make a really realistic, like, you know, I don't want to make a movie where two guys decide to be wrestlers and then boom, they're fighting like Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock in the final scene or whatever. I want to, you know, what happens when two guys want to be pro wrestlers? Well, first you research local wrestling academies, and then you see if they'll take you on, and then you pay your gym fees, and then if you're good enough, you get put into the shows, and then you can start traveling around and doing it with other promotions. You know, like, I just wanted to really show off what it's actually like. And, you know, and people have told us, and a lot of people in the indie wrestling scene as well have told us that, yeah, it's really true to form, but it's also, you know, it's got to be funny too. So there's a few liberties, but really not too much at all. And I would leave out the training sections from the script until I had trained more myself in real life, because I wanted my actual training to be reflected in the film. So I was like, I wonder how this works when you're teaching someone how to do this. And then when the wrestlers would teach me how to do that, then I would put it into the movie.
Yeah, and that's really cool. And I imagine too, when you were talking about to the actors, that, you probably were like, "Hey guys, you'll probably have to go through there, take a few bumps, and they have to be cool with it." You know what I mean? Like, so it goes into sort of the whole idea of paying your dues for your craft, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the only people that really took bumps were, besides the actual professional wrestlers that are in the film, are myself and Chris Wilcox, who plays the other wrestler. And I don't even think I could have cast this movie if I had the money to, because I don't know who would have done this. Like, when you see the film, you'll see there's a few moments in it you're like, oh my God, that was pretty harsh. And the reason that it's just extra intense for an audience watching it is because you're comfortable watching a movie for the first act, and you're into the performers, and then all of a sudden they're doing things that you would see a stuntman do. And that was sort of where a production value would be, I figured, from the is that we would be doing all these things ourselves. And we shot the film for only $40,000 Canadian, which is another thing that I wanted to bring up, because when people ask me, like, how'd you get all the money together to shoot Heel Kick? And I was like, well, it's easy to get the money together when you're not asking for $500,000 or $3 million, or if you're not making like a big epic sci-fi film. Like, I don't want to write something that I know I could never afford to get made. But anyway, back to my point. Yeah, as a director, you probably shouldn't ask any actor to do anything you're not willing to do yourself. So I made sure to do all the worst things myself, and share them, of course, with my co-star Chris.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, because people write things that really, sometimes they think they can shoot like a sci-fi movie, a 100-page sci-fi movie for like $10,000, and it's just like, there was a person I knew who was trying to shoot a time traveling period piece for like $5,000, and I said, you're going to spend $5,000 in clothes alone, unless of course you travel back in time and you shoot it in a state park, and you also have one character dressed up in historical times, regalia, and then it's even pushing it. Like, so it has to be like a very quickly done and shot very, very carefully. So, because if you have something in the background like a skyscraper, or it's supposed to be a war going on, there's no army or something, it immediately just destroys the whole idea what you're trying to do.
Yeah, you got to be careful about what you're planning on shooting.
Yeah, so it just that's why, again, we always have to have, always aim high, but then always realize what you have access to. Make those lists of resources and stuff like that. And so, Denny, I wanted to ask you, where can people check out Heel Kick movie?
So currently, it's just we're forewalling a little theatrical tour around North America. So upcoming screenings there's going to be one in Saskatoon, there's going to be one in Portland, and most likely one in Seattle. And those are going to be over the next 6 or 7 weeks. And then we are finally going to call it a day with our theatrical tour. And we're going to get the film out there onto iTunes. We're going to self-distribute it. So we're using Distribber, speaking of Jason Brubaker. So that is going to be what we're rolling out in the next little while here. In the meantime, people can follow it at Heel Kick Movie on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Yeah, and very cool that you're touring with it. And Jason Brubaker, awesome guy. I'm so glad that you're using Distribber. I'm telling you, I always tell people, if you really are confused about how to distribute your movie, go talk to Jason. Like, Jason's so just straightforward with it too. He goes, look, maybe you can just put a buy now button on a website. You know what I mean? And it's just he's not, even though he does work for Distribber, he's not always like, oh, you got to go to Distribber or else blah blah blah. He is like one of the straightest and most honest guys, and he's so knowledgeable, like you said, and he's a good guy to know.
Yeah, he's a straight shooter, and he's a really good guy. I would recommend indie filmmakers think about using that platform or other ones like it early, like while you're writing, because it's just going to make things so much easier if you know what your film should wind up and what avenues you're going to take it down before you even start shooting.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Danny, we've been talking for about, I guess maybe about 55 minutes now. Is there anything in closing that you have any final thoughts or anything you want to say that we can get a chance to, or even just anything you want to say to sort of put a period at the end of this whole conversation?
say, yeah, I mean, check out the trailer. If it seems like a movie that interests you, follow us along. We're really active on social media, and we always let people know where the film is going to be and when it's going to be out. And we'd love for people to watch it. Really do not have to know anything about professional wrestling at all to enjoy the film. That is, and that's me quoting hundreds of people who have seen it, who have no interest in professional wrestling. And that was just as important to us as making a film that hardcore wrestling fans would love as well. So we think we've struck the balance. And you'll definitely get some laughs out of it. So I really hope people can check it out, and hopefully it is out there in the big wide world of the internets early fall, maybe like early October.
And I'm going to make sure to check out the movie when it comes out, Danny, in early October, because I do want to check this out, again, because it's right up my alleyway. And Danny, where can people find you at online?
Online, they can find me at _Danny Mac, pretty much everywhere.
Cool. And I will link to all that in the show notes, everybody, at davebullis.com. Twitter, it's at Dave_Bullis, and the podcast is at DB Podcast. Danny Mac, I want to say thank you so much for coming on and chatting Heel Kick movie and all this good stuff. And everything that Danny and I talked about will be in the show notes at davebullis.com. Danny, I wish you the best luck with Heel Kick movie, and I look forward to see what you got coming out next after this is all said and done, all the dust settles, and I want to see what you come out with next.
Thanks very much. I'm a fan of the show, and I think it's a great tool for filmmakers to listen to. So I appreciate being on.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.